Welcome back. In this video, we're going to go ahead and get started with Mental Ray. Before we get started with going into production workflows and working with Mental Ray pretty heavy duty, we have to first see how to use preview rendering tools to go ahead and preview our scenes and such to make sure that they're coming out pretty good. So let's open up our first example scene, use Control-O for that. And we'll go ahead and open up the scene called primitives_start. So let's open up that scene. It's a very simple primitive scene as the name suggests. Don't worry, we won't be seeing any more of these primitive simple scenes like this. So don't worry about that. I'm just using this to show some quick examples here of how to preview render with Mental Ray. So what does preview rendering mean? Well, when you're working on your scene, when you're working on your project and such, you're going to be preview rendering all the time to make sure everything's looking right. Because we can't see the final render just by looking at the viewport. We have to actually render. So Mental Ray has two tools that we can use to accomplish this task. Two tools for preview rendering are the RenderRegion and the Render Preview. So in this video, we'll focus on the RenderRegion. The RenderRegion is very, very simple to use. We can go over here to the Render toolbar, and under the Render menu, we can go to Regions, and then use this tool called the RenderRegion tool. You can see the shortcuts listed over here, and it's Q. I prefer to use the shortcuts, and to be honest with you, if you're not using the shortcuts in production, you're going to work very, very slow. So we'll use the shortcut key, which is Q on the keyboard, and then we'll left mouse button click and drag to create this RenderRegion. So it's pretty simple to use. And we'll notice the RenderRegion is also outlined by this yellow line, and that actually has meaning, and we'll talk about that in a moment. For right now though, we'll talk about how to hide and bring back these render regions. You can hide the render region by hitting this little X icon up here, and that closes it out. You can bring it back by holding down the Q key and then pressing the middle mouse button on your keyboard. That'll go ahead and bring back the RenderRegion tool. We can actually grab the RenderRegion window and move it around. Just hover your mouse over one of these yellow border lines and you notice that your mouse cursor changes to 4 arrows. You can now left click and drag and move the RenderRegion anywhere you want in your viewport. We can also resize and scale the viewport, RenderRegion viewport here to whatever we want. So if we go to these little blue handles, which are located at all 4 corners here of the RenderRegion, as well as all 4 sides, we can rescale and change the size of this RenderRegion any way we see fit. We can also change the quality. If you notice up here in the upper right, the RenderRegion window here, we have this little blue rectangle right here, and if we hover our mouse over it, a little slider pops up. If we increase the slider by clicking and dragging to the top, we increase the quality of the render. This slows down rendering, however, by applying more anti-aliasing to the RenderRegion. If we lower the slider, we'll get worse quality, but we'll get lightning fast renders because the less quality, the faster the render. So it's a trade-off. So you can try putting it in the middle there and getting yourself a nice balance of speed and quality. Okay, we can also go up here to this menu. If we click on this little black arrow icon up here, we can open up a little sub-menu with some more options. We can select to hide the RenderRegion. We can also click on refresh to refresh the RenderRegion. We can also click on track selection. And track selection is pretty interesting. Let me show you how that works. Say for example, we want to track this strange object which I called swiggly thingy for lack of a better name. If we go ahead and create a RenderRegion over it, and then we click over here and go to this option called track selection, what will happen is that the RenderRegion will only render out the selection or the area around the selection. So as I move around like this, you can see that the RenderRegion is trying to constrain the render area to basically this sort of volume or this area around that specific object that I have selected. So it's a pretty neat tool using the tracking feature there of the RenderRegion. So let's turn track selection off. Let's make a smaller RenderRegion here. The smaller your RenderRegion, the faster it renders. Then we have this auto refresh flag, and it's checked on by default. If we click on it, we'll turn it off. You'll notice also the RenderRegion turns from yellow to red on the borders. This is to let you know that you're not using auto refresh mode. Auto refresh mode, if we turn it back on, is shown in yellow. What that means is if I take, say, one of these objects and I go and I grab its shader by opening up the render tree there, and I change its color, for example, you see that auto refresh will change the color automatically. If I come back up here and I change that, I take auto refresh off, whenever I make a change like that, the render region will not update. As you can see, I'm changing the color here for the shader, and the render region is not updating. If I want to force it to update when it's in manual mode, which is the red mode, I can just hold down the render region tool and hit the right mouse button. When I click with the right mouse button, it manually refreshes the render region whenever I want. This can be extremely useful if you don't like the automatic mode and you like to manually refresh the region whenever you want to or you feel you need to. So it's a pretty neat little option there. Let me close that Fong Shader PPG. Okay, let's go back to the options here, and we have a few other things that we can do. We can save out the actual image in the render region by clicking on Save As. This will allow us to go ahead and save this to anywhere we want on our hard drive. By default, XSI places it in the Render Pictures directory or folder inside of my project directory, which is this one here, i3 Tutorials Rendering Volume 1, which is a pretty neat little feature. Let's go back to the options. We can see that we can also display different types of information. Right now we're set to RGB only, but if we want to, we can display just the alpha, which will look like this. We can see the alphas in white. We can also display different things like the alpha blended with the RGB, which looks like this. So over here is just gray like in our viewport because there's nothing there. And this is the alpha over here with the image blended on top, which is a pretty neat way of viewing your render region. We can also view just the red channel, or just the green channel, or the blue channel. So it's very simple to use, very straightforward. We can also go ahead and select render channels. So we can go ahead and display the main render channel, or maybe we only want to display the ambient color, which you'll see right here, update in the render region. Maybe we want to display the specular, which you'll see here in the render region. There's the specular highlights in my scene. So it's pretty useful little options there for the render region. And then of course we have the options down here. If we click on that, we'll open up a PPG that allows us to change the mental ray render options with the render region. Up here we can select to use the current pass options, and we'll talk more about that later. Basically what this does, it tells the render region to use the mental ray options that are defined at the pass level as opposed to the render region level. Those are two different areas where you can set the mental ray options, for render region or for the final pass. Okay, and down here of course we have the mental ray options, which you can see there's lots of tabs for final gathering, global illumination, frame buffer optimization, rendering, so on and so forth. And we'll be going pretty deep into this stuff a little bit later in a video further down the road. For now we'll just talk about the render region. So I'll close that. So the render region is pretty straightforward to use. Really there isn't much more to it besides the stuff that I just went over. And most of these options here are available in this little hidden menu here when you click on the black arrow icon on top of the render region. So that's pretty much all there is to the render region. I'm going to go ahead and end this video here. Pretty simple to use, right? Render region is very easy to use. It makes it very interactive and very easy to render out your scene and preview it and help you along with your work. So I'll end this video here, and in the next one we'll start talking about how to use the other render preview tool, which is called the render preview.